The deeper we explore into these ruins, the more concerned I become. With the discovery of this mural, the site is connected in some way to the cult of Vargosh. That cannot be a coincidence, and yet the site was discovered after the Vidala family fled from Hartvale. It is unclear to me whether or not they were instigators of those troubles, or if they were merely pawns. The events at the Defara estate also puzzle me. The artifact and the Lord's transformation into a being of great power point to a greater game being played. Is there something in this ruin that might provide context for what is happening? Is there something dangerous here? I have sensed a darkness, a vile magic, but there is something else. The purpose of these runes is unclear to me. Perhaps, if we press on a little deeper, we will discover answers to these questions. Welcome back for another episode of Errant Adventures. As always, I'm your game master and solo player, Steve Morrison. On this week's episode, the Crest soldiers and the scholar continue their exploration of the ruin below and quickly find themselves in a precarious position. Find out what happens on episode 29, Playing with Fire. Last episode, Arid, Ben, and Orchid, along with the scholar Silas Wilberforce, continued exploring the Aelfhime ruin outside of Veilwater. They entered the ruin and made their way into a room where the ceiling started to collapse on them. But that collapse was somewhat fortunate because it opened up a secret passageway that led them to a small mausoleum with an obsidian sarcophagus. They heard some scuttling of denizens inside this ruin, and so continued on, and they made their way through a rubble-filled hall until they came to a four-way vestibule with this floating green-gray piece of ore that seemed to be drawing mystical energy from all four of the halls. They encountered a barrier, but Arid was able to absorb some of the magical energy and use that power to lower the barrier so they could pass through. In the next hall, as they were walking, they discovered a mural that showed a battle between these strange, corrupting insectoid creatures and a beautiful city. The mural ended with the last of these insectoid creatures, a beetle, being torn to pieces by the last surviving defender of this city. And this figure left the city carrying the pieces of this beetle away from the city. It was at that moment that Arid and Ben recognized the symbols around this beetle as belonging to Vargosh, god of decay and corruption, who has long since been dead and overthrown, but who, by all accounts, has been worshipped by the Vidala family. So as they are standing there looking at this mural, and Arid has expressed the name of Vargosh, I think we need to ask the question, does Silas know anything about Vargosh? And let's just go ahead and do a straight up Ask the Oracle. So I think it is 50-50. I feel like Vargosh has not been around for at least 300 years. So the likelihood of him knowing something about it is less, but I think because he's a scholar at the scriptorium, that increases the chance of him having some knowledge of the cult of Vargosh, especially if there is some sort of connection with Aelfhime. So I'm going to say it's 50-50. I'm going to roll my percentile dice. 0, 4, which is a no. So no, he does not know anything about Vargosh. So I think when Arid says the name Vargosh, there's a strange like chill in the air, and those runes keen a little bit, and they are silent after a moment. And the explorers of this site look around, and then Silas says, "That name apparently means something to those runes that we see, but unfortunately, it doesn't mean anything to me. Is this some sort of old god?" And Arid and Ben nod, and Arid says, "He was a god of decay and corruption, worshipped by the Vidala family, who recently were causing trouble in the city. We had dealings with them, and they fled from the city. We have come across other artifacts in the city as well, belonging to Vargosh, and it seems strange to me that this site is such a close proximity to the city and has a mural that could be related to Vargosh. Is it possible that this place, being overrun by dark magic, is some sort of shrine to this old god?" And I think Silas says, "It's possible, although I will say with the way that those mystic runes have been reacting to our presence, not keeping us out, but perhaps keeping things in, and the way that they interacted with your use of that name, even just now when you said it again, they made this strange keening sound. I think it's likely that this place is not a shrine, but in fact perhaps a holding place. Perhaps one of those pieces is buried here, and that's why you're feeling that sense of evil and foreboding." "That is a very interesting thought, Master Wilberforce. Perhaps we should keep exploring and see what we find." At which point I think Ben says, "Maybe we should consider going back. This might be a little bit too much for us to handle." Arid looks at Ben and says, "Ben, I did not figure you to be afraid of monsters in the dark." Something about old gods and decay and corruption certainly don't fill me with excitement. I'm just saying, I think it might be wise for us to return. Silas, I think, says, "I would normally agree, but if this site is some sort of holding place for an evil artifact, we should know about it so that we can report it to Heartvale and have it dealt with properly. Otherwise, it's entirely possible that more of these evil forces are going to leak out of the area." Ben listens to the scholar and then says, "Perhaps you're right. I think we should be cautious, however." Arid nods and says, "But of course, my friend. We are nothing if not cautious. But I do think there is something for us to discover here, so let us continue on and see what we find." And Arid is going to take the lead. Now, just as a reminder, we are working on a mission here to explore this Aelfhime ruin, and we have 4 progress on that vow. And then we are also at the same time delving this ruin, and that we have 6 out of 10 boxes of progress. So we're going to go ahead and continue to delve the depths as we explore. So when you delve the depths, we are going to choose to roll plus edge, plus shadow, or plus wits, depending on our approach. Since Arid is resuming the lead, we're going back to rolling plus wits, and Arid's wits are plus 3. So I'm going to roll my d6, add plus 3, and then I'm going to roll my 2d10 as the challenge dice to see how this goes. 6 is my action score, and I've got a 7 and a 3 on the challenge dice for another weak hit. So we continue our trend of getting weak hits on our Delve the Depths. So I'm going to roll on the weak hit result table. I got a 19, which is mark progress and reveal a danger. So I'm going to mark another box of progress because it is a formidable sight. That takes us to 7 out of 10 boxes of progress. And then we're going to reveal a danger. So we're going to once again roll on the table again. 54. You encounter a hostile denizen. Awesome. So let's go ahead and pick our denizen here. So I'm going to roll on our denizen table. 06 is very common, which means we're going to come across some cave spiders. Perfect. Now let's get a vision for what this area that we're moving through is. 99. You transition into a new theme. So currently we have a corrupted theme, but maybe this is where we transition out of the corruption and back into that ancient theme that I originally thought we were going to be in. Because I think there's still like corruption going on here, but we're reaching a point where things are sort of untouched as we get deeper and deeper into this site. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to change this to ancient. This place holds the secrets of a bygone age. Perfect. And I'm going to roll on aspect and focus to get an idea of what this area looks like. 70. Mysterious. And the focus. 20. Mysterious hideaway. So we're transitioning from a corrupted site, a corrupted theme into an ancient theme, which I think maybe means that those runes are beginning to fade away. They're not as prevalent. And I think what happens is as they leave this hall, the far side of the hall that they were walking through, that they found this mural, they come to a set of steps that lead down. And they begin climbing down these steps, and I think once again there's maybe a crack or a fissure in the wall. And they see that there is a passage that leads off away from where the bottom of the steps and the like hallway that the steps lead to goes. There's this other fissure that they're able to climb through. And once they get through to that side, there aren't the same runes etched on the walls there. And for Arid, there's almost a sense that the air is a little bit cleaner down here, which is strange because it's a little bit mustier and a little bit cooler down here because they're a little deeper in the hill, a little deeper in the earth. And this place has been sealed up for who knows how many hundreds of years. So they continue walking down this corridor until they reach another room. And I think this other room is a small alcove, a chamber. And there is a cot, like a stone slab for sleeping on. And it looks very much like a cell or a small room in a dormitory. And there is this stone slab for sleeping on. There are perhaps some shelves that hold moldering books, pages of parchment. And as they're looking around, I think Orchid hears that scuttling again and says, I think there might be something here. Everybody be on your guard. And they are going to draw out Bone Eater, their inscribed axe, and begin looking around. There is a scuttling as from the doorway that leads out of this dormitory, out of this cell. These long, spindly legs sort of curl around the half-open door, and a cave spider crawls into the room. As one spider enters the room, so does another, and another, and another. And these are probably the size of a small dog as they come in. And there's poison dripping from their mandibles as they enter the room. And it's a small room, so there is this sudden flurry of activity as Ben says, "Spiders," and draws his sword. Arid begins to chant in his own language. Silas, I think, shrinks back towards the passageway that led them here. And Orchid begins singing a song of their homeland. And we are going to go into a combat here. So this combat is going to be defeat the cave spiders, and because it's a small room and because these spiders are swarming into this small room, I am going to make it a formidable fight. So it is time for our mercenaries to enter the fray. When you enter combat, set the rank of each of your foes. Instead of doing that individually for each spider, I'm just counting them as a group. And so the progress track will count for all of them. And then roll to determine who is in control. If you are facing off against your foe, roll plus heart. If you're moving into position against an unaware foe or striking without warning, roll plus shadow. Or if you are ambushed, roll plus wits. I don't think that this counts as an ambush, even though they kind of like poured through the doorway, because I think they had enough warning of hearing that like scuttling that they knew that they were coming. So this is basically going to be plus heart for all of them. So we'll start with Arid, as his heart is 2. We've got an 8 on the action score, a 2 and a 1 on the challenge dice for a strong hit. So on a strong hit for Enter the Fray, Arid is in control, and he gets to add +2 momentum. So for a strong hit on Enter the Fray, Arid has the initiative and gets +2 momentum, which is going to increase his momentum up to +4. Ben has a heart of only 1, so he is going to roll. As usual, rolls terribly. That's 2 on the action score, an 8 and a 10 on the challenge dice for a miss. So you begin combat at a disadvantage, pay the price. I think the disadvantage for Ben, I know I said that he drew his sword, but he was carrying a crossbow. And so I think he's got this sort of awkward moment where he's got the crossbow in one hand. He's trying to draw the sword. They're in relatively close quarters. And so I think he has to like disengage himself from the crossbow and sort of toss it on the ground before he can draw his sword out. And in that split second, it puts him at a disadvantage. And then we are going to roll for Orchid. So Orchid is also going to roll plus heart. Orchid's heart is 2. 7 on the action die, a 7 and a 10 on the challenge dice for another miss. So this is interesting. Both of our sort of like frontline fighters are in a bad spot. They don't have the initiative here. And so I think for Orchid, let's go ahead and pay the price on Orchids here because I don't have a good idea of what the complication might be. 38. The current situation worsens. What that tells me is Orchid was the closest to the door, and even though they have their axe out, is immediately swarmed. And I think what that tells me as well is Orchid has an asset called Keen. And that is when you hold a weapon and sing a keen for those it has killed, roll plus heart. And it can add bonuses to damage when striking and clashing and whatnot. I think the complication here for Orchid is that they were starting this keen, but because they're closest to the door, these spiders swarm through and scuttle forward, and they are going to approach Orchid before Orchid is able to complete the keen. So I'm not going to roll on that ritual because of that. So Orchid is not going to have access to the abilities of the keen. So at this point, Arid has the initiative and Orchid and Ben do not. And in combat, having the initiative versus not having the initiative means that those who have the initiative can be proactive. Those who do not have the initiative have to be reactive. So let's take a look at Arid's assets and see what he has. So we know he has the sighted ability where he can gather information to detect mystic forces. He has the invoke ability where he can consume mystical energies from around him. And then he also has an ability called Light Bearer. So when you focus on a source of light and capture its essence, roll plus wits. On a strong hit, set your light track to 6. On a weak hit, make it plus 3. Then when you make a move to overcome or navigate darkness, you may add plus 2 and suffer minus 1 light. So I'm going to do that right now, and I'm going to roll plus wits, which is plus 3 for Arid. That's an 8 on the action score, a 6 and a 1 on the challenge dice for a strong hit. So that is going to set our light track to 6. And then I also have the ability of you may use your light to strike or clash against a dark dwelling foe. Choose the amount of light to unleash and roll plus light instead of iron or edge. Suffer minus light equal to the amount. On a hit, your harm is 1 plus your unleashed light. So I'm going to go ahead and have Arid call upon this fire. He's holding a torch in his left hand, and he begins chanting in this arcane voice. And the fires around him of the torches that his companions are carrying as well begin to dim a little bit as that energy is drawn into his right hand. And this ball of fire is filling his hand, and I am going to just go for it. I'm going to spend 4 light and roll plus 4 on this. 6 on the action score, a 3 and a 6 on the challenge dice for my strike is a weak hit. Okay, so I was hoping for a strong hit on that, but it is not how these things go sometimes. So on a strike, on a weak hit, I inflict harm and lose the initiative. So Arid unleashes a torrent of flame across this room, and it strikes several of the spiders, and some of them are scorched and driven back a little bit, and it's 1 plus the amount of light I spent, so that's 5 harm. Because this is a formidable fight, that is going to be 5 boxes of progress out of 10 filled, because it's 1 box of progress for each harm dealt in a formidable fight. So he kills a couple of the spiders. They sort of like screech and their legs twist up as they flip over and sizzle and pop. But there are more swarming into the room, and now Orchid and Ben are beset by them. I'm going to say that Orchid is going to clash. So Orchid is standing there. They have their axe out, and even though the keen was not successful, even though they were not able to complete this Pheromorchian song of battle, they are still going to swing away with their iron of +3. And when you strike or clash in close quarters, you may suffer -1 momentum and inflict +1 harm on a hit. And I have to decide that before rolling. So I only have 2 momentum with Orchid, so I'm only going to spend 1 momentum to increase the harm by +1. So here we go, +3 on this clash. 6 on the action die, a 9 and a 7 on the challenge dice for a miss. So Orchid swings out with Bone Eater, but these spiders scuttle around and past them, and the axe scrapes against the stonework in this small room, and I think Orchid is unable to connect with any of these fast-moving spiders. And because of that, we're going to have to go ahead and pay the price. So let's roll that up. 11. You are separated from something or someone. Okay, this is perfect. So I think because they're in this small room, and there are basically like 4 of them in this like bedroom, essentially, I think with the first swing of the axe, the blade of Bone Eater scrapes against the stonework, and Orchid has to sort of redirect their swing to avoid hitting Ben, and very quickly realizes that they're not going to be able to use Bone Eater in this small enclosed area, and so discards it quickly, drawing out a small dagger in order to better be able to maneuver. But because of that, they're not going to have access to their Sunderer asset, which is that ability to sacrifice momentum. And I think at this point, it's just dagger versus spider mandibles. That means that, at least for the moment, Orchid is at even more of a disadvantage, because the dagger's not going to do nearly as much damage to these spiders as their axe would. While that's happening, Ben has his sword. He's trying to draw his sword, and I think he is going to try and face danger to gain a little bit of room. I think he retreats a little bit as he realizes that Orchid's axe might take his head off, and he sort of ducks and rolls back away from the onslaught of these spiders, and he is going to roll plus edge. So Ben's edge is 2. Here we go. 7 on the action score, a 9 and a 10 on the challenge dice for another miss. It's not going great for Ben and Orchid. So on a miss, you fail, or your progress is undermined by a dramatic and costly turn of events. You know it. We're going to pay the price. 82. A surprising development complicates your quest. Uh-oh. So there is a major plot twist table, and I think I'm just going to roll on that to see what this unexpected complication is. 91. Unexpected powers or abilities are revealed. Okay, so at first we thought these were just run-of-the-mill cave spiders, but maybe they're more than that. And I think that means that they have to have some sort of weird ability. So we're going to go to the monstrosity table and roll on abilities. 6. Intimidating vocalization. Okay, cool. So Ben is scrambling back. He's trying to escape from these spiders, and they're skittering and scuttling all over the stonework of this room, when I think all of a sudden this weird ululating reverberation fills the room, and Ben covers his ears and can see that Orchid and Arid are having a similar reaction in this moment, and the spiders are communicating with each other, maybe trying to communicate with the humans, and this guttural ululation is just shaking the foundations of the stone in here, and it seems to be building to a fever pitch. In that moment, it is back to Arid, and I think his fire unleashed on the spiders around them, but the ones that he burned and destroyed are replaced by others as they come scuttling in. They're on the walls and on the ceilings, and Arid calls out, "Get back to the tunnel. We have to get out of here. We have to funnel them in." And he is going to also face danger to try and make it to the tunnel where Silas is currently hiding out. And so we're going to do that with edge, speed, agility, and precision. So facing danger, +2, 8 on the action score, 10 and a 3 on the challenge dice is a weak hit. So he is successfully able to make it to the tunnel entrance, but has to face a troublesome cost. Choose one. Delayed, lose advantage, or face a new danger. Suffer -1 momentum. Suffer harm, suffer stress, or suffer supply. Ooh. I'm going to say he probably gets a little hurt. So I'm going to tick down 1 point of harm as a couple of the spiders, they have these spiny, like spiky claws attached to their legs, and as Arid is falling back, a couple of them swipe out at him and slice through his clothing, and he kind of grimaces a little bit, making his way to the tunnel entrance. He still does not have the initiative, which is not great, but we're going to pop over to Orchid, who I think is going to again clash, because Orchid is the sort of main line of defense for the door. And in fact, instead of clashing, I'm going to say that Orchid is going to face danger. They are going to try and charge forward and slam their shoulder into the door and see if they can slam it shut and hold it shut against what could be more of these cave spiders scuttling towards them. Because at this point, there are enough in the room that if they don't stop them from coming in, they're going to get overrun no matter what they're doing. So this is going to be rolling plus iron on face danger. This is +3. 4 on the action score, a 3 and a 6 on the challenge dice is another weak hit. So I'm going to say it is going to be the same thing. Orchid is going to endure some harm from this. So their health is going to go from 5 to 4, but they are successfully able to slam the door shut and hold it against these other spiders that are coming along. I don't think the other spiders are probably strong enough to push the door open on their own. So I think once the door is closed, I don't think Orchid has to like stand and hold it. I think they can spin around and face the spiders that are inside the room with them. But in the process, I think one of those spiders bites into Orchid's shoulder, and they are swearing in Pharamorchian as they kind of shrug the spider off. venom is dripping down their shoulder. And fortunately, Orchid is a very hardy individual and is able to, for the moment, withstand the effects of that poison. Ben, not really able to withdraw and make it back towards that cave entrance, is also going to clash. And unfortunately for Ben, this is going to be in close quarters, and his iron is 1. So he is going to strike out with his sword at +1. 2 on the action score, a 5 and a 6 on the challenge dice for another miss. Poor Ben. These dice have been so cold. So we're going to pay the price once again, as this clash is not going the way that we wanted. 60. It is harmful. Okay. So here's the problem for Ben. The others took harm as a minor complication, but in combat, when you take harm as part of a miss on a clash or a strike, you're basically trading blows with your opponent. And because this is a formidable fight, Ben is going to take 3 points of damage to his health. So his health is at 5, and he's going to go down to 2 health as a couple of these spiders latch onto his arm, and he kind of like drops the torch that he was holding, and there's venom and poison like dripping from his open wounds, and he's sort of staggering around a little disoriented and unsure of what's happening. And unfortunately, he and Orchid are both cut off from Arid and Silas at the entrance of this tunnel. It's not looking good for our heroes, but it is back to Arid, and you know what? Arid is going to spend his last 2 points of light to clash. And so he's going to roll +2 and hope for some fire. 4 on the action score, 6 and an 8 on the challenge dice for another miss. So he is out of fire, and he also misses on his clash, which means we're going to roll our pay the price. 49. A new danger or foe is revealed. Okay, so this has just gone from bad to worse. What could this other foe be? Let's take a look at our denizen list here. We've got common cave spiders, we've got common imps, lightning vines, a dire mole, a bone bear. Let's just roll our percentile dice here and see what is revealed. 89, which is one of our unfilled, uncommon denizens. So, well, I guess we're rolling up a new denizen for this place. So let's see what the size is. 56 is medium. Okay, so it is a medium-sized creature. What is its form? 98. It's a hybrid. 78 is incorporeal. That's not good. And 44, an incorporeal worm. What is its characteristics? 79 has an exoskeleton or a shell. And what kind of abilities does it have? 15. It's intelligent. Okay. So there is an incorporeal worm with an exoskeleton that is intelligent, and there probably needs to be another ability other than just intelligent. 78. Shapeshifting. Great. Oh boy. Okay. So this thing is intelligent and it shapeshifts. Could it be reasoned with? I think we're going to have to ask the Oracle, and I'm going to say it's just a flat 50-50 here. Is this creature able to be reasoned with. 51 or greater is going to be a yes. 23. No, of course not. Why would that be reasoned with? It is intelligent, meaning that it's probably been driven by whatever vile magics were released in this site at some point. And it has this malicious intelligence to it. But it is in no way reasonable. So let's call this a Necdesolith. And I think what this is going to look like is Arid and Silas are in the corridor, in this passageway that connected the flight of stairs with this small room. And as they're sort of retreating, Arid is bringing fire down on these spiders, but they're dodging and diving out of the way. And behind them, where this corridor of stone is arched a little bit, I think Silas looks back and he sees this like shimmering of stone, at which point the stone itself begins to writhe and move. And this is the shape-shifting part of it. It actually disguises itself as a part of the stone feature in this passageway. And so as the stone moves, this worm descends down and hits the ground, and it's human size, and it has this exoskeleton, and it begins like slithering forward towards Silas and Arid. And does Silas know what this thing is? Does he recognize this creature? Is this a creature that is recognizable in the world, or is this something that you'd only find when delving the depths of an ancient ruin? I'm going to say that it's 50-50. So 51 or greater, yes, he will know what it is. 36, no, he has no idea. So I think he simply looks at it and goes, there's a worm. Oh dear, oh dear, there's a worm. And he begins to freak out as Arid turns and looks at it. And I think in a very typical moment for a member of the Crest mercenary company goes, well, that is very interesting. Does Arid know what it is? I think it's more likely that he would know what it was. 26 or greater. 31, yes, he does. A Necdesolith. How curious. What are you doing here, my friend? And he is maybe not as freaked out as Silas is, although he is greatly concerned with this new turn of events. So I'm going to add a new combatant to this battle, which is the Necdesolith. Now, according to our denizen site here, this is uncommon, which means you could run across one of these things pretty easily in other places. So I'm going to ask the Oracle, is this a dangerous foe? And I'm going to say it's 50-50. 90 is a yes. So it is only dangerous. It's not formidable. If there were more of them, it might be more dangerous. But I think the incorporeal nature of it is not that it's always incorporeal, is that it can phase in and out of incorporeality. And that's why it has an exoskeleton. So when it is not incorporeal, when it is corporeal, it has this exoskeleton to protect it, and it is slithering its way towards Silas and Arid, but it's far enough down the hallway that it's not going to be on them in that one instant, but it is definitely on its way and is a problem that we're going to have to deal with, because as we already determined, it cannot be reasoned with. So Arid has unsuccessfully dealt with the spiders with his fire magic, and unfortunately he is out of his light bearer light. And I'm going to say that he probably can't try to gather more fire while he does not have the initiative. So he is kind of out of luck on that unless he can regain the initiative at some point. But for now, we're going back to Orchid, who is surrounded and I think is going to just clash. I feel like Orchid is just trying to fight their way back towards the rest of the group, and we're going to clash with Iron. So this is just a +3 to this roll. Here we go. Come on, these dice have to turn around eventually. 4 on the action score, 4 and a 7 on the challenge dice for another miss. They are not turning around yet. So once again, we must pay the price. What is this going to be for Orchid? 5. A person or community you trusted loses faith in you or acts against you. I don't know that that fits here, so I'm going to re-roll. 14. You are separated from something or someone. I think this is just a continuation of the challenge that they are all encountering. Orchid is able to make no progress towards the rest of the group. So picture this small room with this small stone bed and this bookshelf with moldering parchment. And it's not a very sizable room, but the spiders are so densely packed in here now that Orchid is unable to move away from the door where they slammed it shut. And Ben is a couple paces away from them, also surrounded by these spiders, bleeding and struggling. Arid is a couple paces beyond in this corridor, and I think Orchid, from their vantage point, can probably see this incorporeal worm sort of like rising up and sliding along the corridor towards the other two, and things are not looking great for the crew here. So Ben is going to see all this as well. Does Ben have something in his bag, some tool, something he could use to help turn the tide in this battle? Maybe? I think we probably just have to ask the Oracle, and so we're going to check our gear. I think he's got a torch on the ground, and I think he saw the effect that Arid's fire had on these creatures in that first moment of the fight. And he is going to look in his bag for a bottle of oil. So they only have one supply, which means their gear is kind of weak. This is a bad idea. But he is going to look for a bottle of oil. We're going to roll plus supply. I want to check my assets to make sure I don't have anything that would help with this. I do, in fact, which is Ben is an improviser. So when you check your gear, you may roll plus wits instead of plus supply. If you do, envision how you make do with a clever solution and take +1 momentum on a hit. So Ben's wits are +2, which is better than +1. So I'm going to do that. Here we go. 8 on the action score, a 1 and an 8 on the challenge dice for a weak hit. So he has the thing. He gets a momentum for getting a successful hit. He has what he's looking for, but his resources are diminished. Take +1 momentum and suffer -1 supply. So that's going to take his momentum from 3 to 4 for the improviser asset and from 4 to 5 for the check your gear. Unfortunately, though, they are now at 0 supply. And what that means is that they are unprepared. So anytime now they have to do some sort of suffering of supply, they don't have supply, and they're going to have to do some things to gain supply back and clear that condition. So they're kind of in a worse spot in the moment here, but Ben has this thing that he needs, and he pulls out a jar of oil that he's been carrying around in his bag. Maybe he even planned to use it when he was poisoning the beer in Percival's brewery way back several jobs ago. He pulls it out, he unstoppers it, and he starts spreading it around. And I am going to make the move, turn the tide. Once per fight, when you risk it all, you may steal the initiative from your foe to make a move. When you do, add +1 and take +1 momentum on a hit. So I am going to take +1 and add +1 momentum on a hit. I'm going to spread this oil around, and I think Ben is going to attempt to secure an advantage now that he has the initiative. He's stolen the initiative. He is trying to secure an advantage for Arid, and he says, "Arid, light them up," and he starts to spread out this oil. Now, he doesn't know that Arid doesn't have any of that fire left, but he's going to attempt to aid his ally by securing an advantage. This is going to be plus wits or plus edge. Can I move this around to be plus deception, stealth, or trickery? I'm going to say, yeah, I think it is trickery because he's spreading oil around. The spiders don't know that this oil is going to burn. They're just kind of getting lathered up with this pitch, and they don't know that this is some sort of trap that Ben is setting for Arid to fire off, if you will. So I'm going to roll this plus shadow because I really, really need this to go well. Ben's shadow is +3. So here we go. Oh, a 9 on the action score, a 10 and a 2 on the challenge dice. I would get +1 because of turn the tide, but unfortunately for Ben, that only takes it to a 10. I couldn't have rolled any better. I got a 10 on one of the action dies. So that is still a hit, which means I'm going to get something off of it, but it is only a weak hit. So on a weak hit, your advantage is short-lived. Take +1 momentum. So I squandered my momentary initiative, but I can give Arid +1 momentum. And I think because I turned the tide and I got a hit, Ben also gets a momentum. So Ben's momentum's up to 6, Arid's is up to 5. We're slowly building that up for a turnaround here. And I think I'm going to do the same sort of thing. I'm going to use Arid's turn the tide right now to try and draw on the flames and try to reset my flame track here. So he is going to use his light bearer asset. He's going to seize the initiative, which is going to give him +1 on this. Roll plus wits, so it'll be +4 total. Oh my goodness. 10 on the action score. 2 10s on the challenge dice for a miss and a complication. Not only has Arid attempted to turn the tide and seize this advantage that Ben has created for him, he is drawing on the fire around him. And this is magic. This is him enacting a piece of mystical force. And there is a mystic backlash table. And you know what? I'm going to roll on that mystic backlash because, well, this is about as bad as it can get. Here we go. 26. You undergo a physical torment which leaves its mark upon you. Okay, so Arid draws on the fire. He's done this once before at the start of this fight, and he unleashed a torrent of flame on these spiders, driving some of them back, but more came swarming in. He sees Ben throw this vial of oil down, and it splashes this oily liquid over all of these spiders around him. And Arid knows that this is the moment that he can unleash fire on these cave spiders, but he needs to draw upon the flames around him. And he does so. Unfortunately, I think his torch isn't enough. I narrated the first time that he drew on this power, and the torches of all those who were present dimmed and flickered. Well, at least one torch has hit the ground. And I think as Arid is drawing forth this fire, some of that oil is making its way through the channels on the stone floor towards one of those torches. And as he draws up the flame and pulls it to his hand, a little bit of that oil catches the edge of that flame and ignites. And it ignites that whole stream of flame that is being drawn to Arid's hand. And it explodes in his hand, and he calls out as fire licks across his face and his neck and his shoulder, and it burns away his clothing, and his hand and his shoulder and his neck begin to burn, and the flesh sizzles under the fire as Arid cries out in agony. And as he cries out, the spiders continue to swarm, and the Necdesilith edges ever closer to Silas in that tunnel. They are surrounded. They are close to being beaten. And Arid, falling to his knees, gasps for breath as he feels the skin on his face and neck burn. Thanks for listening to Errant Adventures, and thanks so much to Syrinscape for the lovely ambient sounds and music throughout the episode. If you enjoyed the show, please tell anyone and everyone in your life about it. And if you haven't already, please rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app. It really does help others find me. If you want to interact with me, my handle on Instagram and Twitter is @ErrantSoloPod, or you can email me at errantsolopod@gmail.com. I also post short fiction and campaign-related materials on my website, errantadventurespod.com. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.